right, guys. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Life Podcast. I'm super pumped that you are here today. If you have not, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are listening to the podcast at. I would love for you to do that. Make sure you leave a rating, review, whatever you got to do. We got to get the word out there that the Life Podcast is for everybody. So thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm super pumped because I have with me one of my best friends since high school, actually. His name is Nathan Haight. Maybe you know him because he's actually TikTok famous. Nathan, how many TikTok followers you got?
Dude, it goes down every day, but right now I'm hanging at around 240,000. So
Nice. 240,000. What was it at its peak time?
247,000 was my highest number.
Nice. 7,000 people have unfollowed you. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's because I haven't posted in like a long time. So,
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Anyway, you have greatly, influenced me in my life and been a great friend. And Nathan, just tell those who are listening who don't know you, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Nathan, and I don't know. I grew up with Austin. We went to high school together. I'm a pastor's kid, so I've grown up in the church all my life. I don't know. I've had a pretty uneventful childhood, but the last year has been really crazy as far as just everything that my wife and I have been through and all of that. But yeah, at least as far as like who I am goes, I feel like I'm a pretty nice guy. And
There you go.
Austin knows how to pick him. I'm a great guy, and
Right.
we're friends. So good
There we
job,
go.
Austin.
Yeah, Nathan, you're a photographer. You do a lot of video stuff. That's what you're famous on TikTok for, photography. People love that. You are now living in Reading. Well, sort of living in Reading. We'll get to that. But you're working at Bethel Church, and you got a child on the way. That's exciting. How do you feel about that?
Oh, great.
Great. And have you guys found out if it's a boy or a girl yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We find out like really soon though, like in a week or something like that. So
Nice. And
Monday,
your prediction is a boy.
that is my prediction. Yes.
Nice. Well, I'm hoping so too. Anyway, today, before we just start talking too much and hitting the breeze, I guess, there are a few topics that I want to touch on, but I really want to hear your story, Nathan. And one topic in particular that I want to talk about as I thought about your story and thought about some things we could talk about was this idea of trusting God kind of in life's uncertain moments. And especially in 2020 has been a year that many people have felt uncertainty, felt, kind of like what's happening, what's going to be the next step for us. And I think a lot of people are feeling that. So I think it'll be a great thing to talk about. And I think your story will lead into that pretty well. So I say we get into it. You ready, man?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Here we go. So since that's what we're going to talk about, catch us up to where you're at in life. You can be as detailed as you'd like. But I kind of want to hear about how you went from, graduating Bible college in your hometown to where you're at now in Redding, California. So kind of give us the lowdown there.
Yeah. So basically from a very early age, I knew that I wanted to be like a pastor or like in ministry at some capacity. I've always I don't know, a lot of people would disagree with me saying this, but I can't really remember the moment that I accepted Jesus into my life. He's just always been super real to me. So I don't know. So anyway, I basically always knew that I wanted to be in ministry, and going out of high school into college, or like just trying to figure out what the next step was. I was wondering like, what do I do? And I really wanted to do this school, BSSM, which is in Reading, when I graduated high school. But mom, if you're watching, I let my mom convince me that I needed a degree. And I don't regret it, because now I do have a degree, and it actually did help me get the job I have now, like having a degree. But yeah, basically, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Basically, I ended up just staying in Hermiston. I did this online school called SUM Bible College, which it's a super affordable degree. So it's like $10,000 a year, as opposed to like 30,000, 40,000 at a university.
Yeah.
So that was a major selling point for me. So it was super nice to graduate with very little debt compared to others. Um, anyway, so I got out of college and like I graduated. D's get degrees, you know.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm just outing myself this whole time, so all good. Um, anyway, so I graduated college and I literally was so burnt out with it at the time. I was like, I literally told my wife, I said, there is no way I'm ever going back to school. Like, it's not happening. I'm never doing it. I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
And um, so that was in October of last year, actually, or November of last year. Um, and it was like, I don't know. At that time, I was also like super burnt out with my job. I had been the worship leader at my home church for 3 years, and I was under great people, but the person that was my boss was my dad, and I lived with him. So it was kind of like there was no real separation between work and days off. And so pretty much what ended up happening was at least I felt for myself that I never really had a day off, like it started out okay, but, um, little by little, I'd be working like at 9 o'clock at night, getting things done. I'd be up in the mornings and there was like, even though I was only supposed to be working 30 hours a week, it really never felt like I had even a little break.
Mhm.
So I found myself like at that time I was super burnt out, honestly, with ministry, um, with school, just being so busy all the time, just really wore me out. Um, so anyway, so our church actually ended up having a conference with this guy named Chris Overstreet. He's a super awesome guy. He's an evangelist. So if you don't know what that is, he basically he is the guy that feels called to telling people about Jesus, like, and equipping other people to do the same. So it's kind of, he trains people, and it's awesome. And so he ended up coming to our church to do a conference to train and equip people to do that sort of thing. And um, we ended up connecting really well. I do like video stuff and photo stuff. And so I just threw it out there. I said, hey, if you need like photo or video stuff done, I would love to help you guys out. I do that on the side already, and you guys are a great team. Like, you and your team are amazing. So let me know if you need anything done. And then they said, yeah, we actually definitely have been needing somebody like that. But would you ever be open to like moving out? Cause they live in Portland. Their like ministry is out of Portland. So, um, so yeah, basically they asked me and my wife to move out to Portland, and just without even thinking about it, we said yes. Cause at the time I was super burnt out, like I was saying. And I honestly didn't know if I could go any further, like just staying there. Um, but I had no other means to leave other than, if the Lord provided an opportunity, basically. And so that's what he did. We ended up moving out. Financially, it wasn't looking great. But the Lord really provided for us in that way. And so we ended up being in Portland for a few months. And when we went out to Portland was right around the time that COVID hit. So we were only in Portland for a month before everything shut down. Chris's ministry, the people that we were under, his ministry kind of shut down too. They quit traveling. They used to travel a bunch. They quit all of that. And everything was pretty much online from there. And so I ended up having like quite a bit of free time on my hands in Portland. Which, I mean, maybe it was God's plan for me in that time, because honestly, I feel like I definitely needed some kind of break, like some kind of like feeling like I finally have my head above water with things. And so it was really a good break for me there.
Can I interrupt you
Then
for a second?
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you said that you showed up to Portland like a month before COVID hit. Shout out to Rona. and you basically probably weren't doing a whole lot. Did you have a lot of responsibilities as far as Compassion to Action goes? Did you have to do a ton of stuff with them, or you were pretty free?
Yeah, I mean, I was really involved. We did stuff with them every week, but it was like stuff that I actually enjoyed. So it was like photo, video stuff that wasn't super taxing on my energy. Like,
Yeah,
and then it was also just going to church services with them or showing up in a Zoom call for like, the online stuff that they did. It was never like, it was never draining. You know what I mean? Like, I
yeah,
never felt drained doing what I was doing.
yeah. And you guys were still operating fairly well once COVID hit, or was there pretty much a halt on all things, or how did that look?
It wasn't a complete halt. It was just mostly like everything moved to online. So
Yeah,
yeah.
gotcha, gotcha. Cool. Keep telling the story. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. So we got really connected. The team out there was really amazing. We built some really good friendships. And we became a part of this church out there that's amazing. It's called Bethesda Northwest, which is it's a really awesome church. It's in Vancouver, but if you're in Vancouver, you should check it out. It's really awesome. So we're going to church, and around June, I I was I was at church on a Sunday, and I felt like the Lord was speaking to me, and I felt like He told me that I just felt like there was going to be like a shift, and it's like really, it sounds really vague for me to explain it, but I just really felt like an invitation to say yes to whatever was going to come my way, like next. Um, and so like during worship, I'm like, of course, God, I'll say yes to anything, like whatever it is, I'll say yes. And basically, I said that prayer to the Lord, and 30 seconds later, I kid you not, somebody from our team came up to me and was like, um, "Hey, man, I know this is random, but I really feel like the Lord is like wanting me to tell you that you should do BSSM, which is the school that I had wanted to do when I was 18." He was like, "I don't know. I know this is really random, but like, I just feel like that's what God's saying." And it was like 30 seconds after I felt like the Lord had told me to say yes.
Yeah,
And so that was pretty much it right there. Like, I was like, I mean, it wasn't really it because I was really worried because we had literally just got there like 3 months before. We weren't there for long at all. And it really didn't make any sense to me at the time why I would move all the way to Portland just to move to Reading.
right.
Um, so yeah, I was really confused for a while, but the more and more we thought about it, my wife and I thought about it and prayed about it, like it just felt we just felt a lot of peace in that area. Like, and then also like we would get more and more people telling us the same thing. Like, hey, have you guys thought about doing BSSM? It would be amazing. Like, I feel like you guys would fit in really well down there. We'd get people saying that. And we never had anybody tell us that before.
Yeah.
Um, so it really felt great. Or it didn't feel like amazing, but it felt like
Yeah,
this.
no, I remember, I mean, this was only, a couple months ago. Well, I guess it was, probably 6 months ago now, 7 months ago, or I don't know. Anyway, I remember hearing about it and you kinda sharing that with me, and I was like, "Man, these guys, like, just moved to Portland, and they're already trying to get out." Like, it felt like it was really fast, and, I mean, I would never doubt, if God was telling you something that that's one thing that I've always admired about you is that if God says something, you are like the guy that says, "Absolutely, like, I'm gonna do it 100%." And I think many of us are not like that. We're like, "God, like, I just moved to Portland, like, 2 months ago. There's no way you're gonna ask me to move again. Like, that's just crazy." So you said you and Jordan, your wife, prayed about it a ton. Was there ever any moment in there where you were just like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do this, or we don't think we're going to, or what did that look like?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was mostly like at the beginning, it was mostly just panic. Like, we just moved here. What are we even doing? Like, why on earth would we move all the way to Portland just to leave? And there was a lot of worry, like, what's Chris gonna say? Like, we just came out here to help him, and he's been nothing but amazing to us, and now I got to tell him we're leaving, like all of
Yeah,
that stuff. Um, and so there were several moments that we were like, we're probably gonna stay. Um, and every time we thought that, there would just be something else that would happen. So one thing I did is I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna apply to BSSM, and If I get accepted, then that'll be a good sign that I'm supposed to go. And because not a lot of people get accepted, or a lot of people get accepted, but not everybody does. Like, um, it's more common to not get accepted than you would think, is what I'm saying. Even though it's
Yeah.
not accredited or anything, it's um, like I've heard of a lot of people not getting accepted, which is, crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I went into my interview and I found this out uh, after, but my wife prayed before I went, or like while I was in my interview, she said, if we're supposed to move to Reading, then Lord, let him get accepted in his interview. And so I did my interview, and at the end, they were like, all right, well, I know enough about you now to say we are officially accepting you. You are invited to come to our school. Like, just like that, like things like
Wow.
that would happen. So that was a pretty big sign. And after that, I think my wife was really okay with it. Like,
Yeah.
she was like, all right, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah.
We can move.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the permission you need from your wife.
yep,
Then you're good.
that's right. Yep.
The,
Can't
the,
do it
the,
if my wife's
the
not on
two
board.
most important people when you're making a decision are God and your wife.
Yes.
So once it sounds like both of them are on board, so you're good. Um, Yeah, talk to me about this for a second. I know financially things were probably looking pretty tough for you guys. Just moving that costs money, and then trying to move again. Renting U-Hauls, trying to find a place to live, having enough money for, first last month's rent at an apartment. Um, what were your thoughts and feelings? I mean, you're still kind of in the middle of navigating this. So you're living in Sacramento, but going to school in Reading and driving back and forth every week. So tell us a little bit about those beginning feelings that you had. Like thinking, well, how am I going to do this financially? Like this just isn't possible. Like, just talk to
Mhm.
us about that a little bit.
Yeah. This whole year has honestly been a huge journey of moving from fear to faith, honestly. Um, or not necessarily fear, but just unbelief. Um, so around, so August, the month that we're supposed to move, we had we had no money in our bank account. Like literally, we couldn't even pay rent for the final month,
Yeah,
um, which is like not good. And we literally had no money. Like we were literally scraping by. I don't even know how we made it the whole, like however many months we made it when
yeah,
we were in Portland, because like literally we barely had anything. We were living in or not in downtown Portland, but we were living in Portland, like zip code Portland. Uh, and so rent was pretty expensive. Um, yeah, it was August was a pretty difficult month for us this year. Um, so we're like, I mean, I'm like internally, I'm like freaking out. I'm worried. I'm
yeah,
like at the end of the day, if we can't do this, then we can't do this. Like we have no money to move. We can't afford any of this. Um, like, and on top of that, like we can't even stay in Portland if something doesn't happen because we have no money, you know?
yeah,
Like we can't even pay rent anymore. So uh at the time I was reading this book in the Bible called Hebrews, and it's Hebrews in chapter 3. It talks about, and if you're listening to this and you don't have any like Bible like reference or anything like that, the Bible is kind of the story about um, God's relationship with mankind. And so um, a lot of stories from like a lot of stories are referenced. So it's like there'll be a story like early on in the Bible, and then they'll reference it and what it means like way later on. So in Hebrews, it was referencing this story about, to give like a really brief story, basically the Israelites, which were like God's chosen people in the Bible, they were in slavery to Egypt, like all of that. And God basically freed them from slavery, um, and and wanted to give them this amazing land. Like he had this land that he had promised them that was like just amazing, like fruitful. You could farm and like it'd be, and have like amazing crops, and like it was the land that he wanted to bless them with. So God freed them from Egypt. They went to see the promised land, and they saw that there were people already there, and they were actually like giants at the time. And so the Israelite people got afraid of the giants and said, you know what, there's no way that God could actually give us this land because there's giants there. Like, we will die if we try to go up against these guys. And so anyway, so they ended up staying in the desert, like in a desert where there was nothing like at all. Like it wasn't amazing. They basically, they scraped by. They were dirty. They barely had what it took to survive, but the whole time God provided just enough for them to make it, you know.
Yeah.
But the whole time they were there, they were like bitter and angry and mad because and fearful, because they really didn't think that God could give them the land, that even though he had promised it to them. And so Hebrews basically says, um, Hebrews says that the Israelites were in the desert not because God was punishing them, but because they didn't believe that God could bring them to the promised land. So basically, it's saying their unbelief is what kept them from God's promises.
Yeah.
It wasn't God that left them there. It was the fact that they didn't think that he could do it, if that makes sense. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but
Well, that's good. That's really good.
yeah. Um, so I read that and I realized that the only thing that would keep me from like what God is promising over my life is if I choose not to believe that he can give it to me, you know?
Yeah.
And so at the time we had no money. We literally couldn't even afford a U-Haul. We had rent that we had to pay our way out of. So we had a lease that we had to pay our way out of. It was going to be like $2,000. On top of that, we still had to pay off the rest of our August rent. So we were like literally drowning. And I just said, you know what? We have never been in a worse situation, but I'm not going to let fear or unbelief affect my decision making. Like, I believe that God can give me what he's promising me.
Yeah.
And so we took out a little loan from a friend to get a U-Haul and pay the rest of rent. And sorry, I lost my train of thought again.
No, you're good.
I do this a lot. So, um, so yeah. And we went to our landlord and said, listen, we have no money. Can we please get out of our lease for free? And they let us out of our lease for free. We, like I said, we got that little loan to borrow. So we were able to get a U-Haul and load all of our stuff into a storage unit. We still had no place to go in Reading, and still don't. But we were able to make it down here. And as soon as we got down here, we got our tax return, which was supposed to be a certain amount, but I did it wrong. And we got twice the amount that I was expecting.
Wow.
So instead of getting, I think it was like 4,000 that it was supposed to be, we got over $10,000 in our tax return because I punched in a number wrong somewhere. But it only happened after we had moved. Like, it didn't happen when we were still there waiting on God to do something, you know.
Yeah.
It happened after we stepped out and said, I believe that you will provide for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so what I want to say to that is, sometimes like we're waiting on God to provide for us or give us a crazy sign that he wants us to do a certain thing. But sometimes we actually have to create the space for God to do something miraculous. Like, he's waiting for us to show him that we have faith to believe for his promises. There's a lot of stories in the Bible, and I don't mean to get like super preachy, but there's a lot of stories in the Bible. For example, like when Jesus turned the water into wine, he actually wasn't supposed to turn the water into wine. Like, he wasn't supposed to perform miracles at the time. So if you don't know the story, Jesus and his mom are at this wedding, and all they have is water. And his mom comes to him and says, like, basically, she knows that he's the Christ. She knows that he's God on earth. She says, what are you going to do? These people need wine. And he said, why are you asking me to do this? Like, you know that I'm not supposed to. And she basically said, like, if I can paraphrase, she said, I can't take this anymore. You have to do something, like, do something,
Mama
I'm
says to do
creating.
it, you got to do it.
That's right. Basically, I'm creating space for you to do a miracle. I know you can do it, and I'm not going to back down on this, basically. So she goes to the servants and she says, do whatever he tells you to do. And that's where the creating space comes in. She says, do whatever he tells you to do. And so he tells them to, like, bring barrels of water, all of that. And of course the miracle happens, even though he wasn't supposed to. um, so I'm just saying, like, how much more would, if you create space for God to provide or for God to do something miraculous in your life, if he's promising it to you, how much more will he, deliver the promise, if he's the one that wants it to happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, so over and over, we've been provided for here. We ended up getting unemployment that uh, we didn't even know we were eligible for because of COVID. um, just over and over, we've seen so many things happen that just are unexplainable. Like, I literally have not even worked a job this year, but we've had money in our savings and then some,
Yeah.
which is crazy. Um, but yeah, right now we're basically still looking for a house, but there's been a lot of sacrifice there in um, there's been a lot of sacrifice there in making the commute from Sacramento, because we're living at my wife's parents' house right now because it's free rent, and it's somewhere to go. But there's been a lot of sacrifice with the long trips back and forth to do school and um, all of that. But like, it's just been such a big journey of, like, stepping out and realizing just how much God's going to provide. You know what I mean? So it's been crazy. I've never been in this position in my life, but, like, issues that used to terrify the crap out of me, just, it's like, what does it even matter anymore? Like, um, for
Yeah.
example, like, I still have to pay my school bill, and right now it's at like $2,000, like, due like next week, and we don't have that kind of money. But it's like, what's $2,000 to, like, the Lord? You know what I mean? Like, it does, like, things that used to be huge, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die, are like, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
I feel
great.
what you're saying. I love that. That's a super encouraging story. And I mean, maybe you're listening and you're fired up right now because I feel like I just want to, like, move out of my house and just trust the Lord for everything. But just to give a little disclaimer, obviously you are acting on, the promises that God has given you. I wouldn't recommend, just dropping everything if you do not, sense that that's what God's calling you to do. But that's an amazing story. And I think that you guys navigated that, like, super, super well. At least, just watching it from the outside, I've been super encouraged and inspired watching. So let's switch gears a little bit as we talk about this. Um, you've explained, how you felt like God was telling you to do this. God was calling you to BSSM. You've had many confirmation signs from Him, and I want to talk about kind of hearing from God. Because there are a lot of people who would say, well, I don't hear the voice of God. I've never heard the voice of God. He might speak to other people, but he's not speaking to me. Um, how did you really learn to hear God's voice? I mean, you can give as many details again as you'd like to about that. And how does he speak to you? What does that look like? Just give us a little bit of, information of what that looks like in your life.
Yeah. So God can speak in a lot of different ways. Um, for example, like, we have the Bible. The Bible is God's word, so, like, that is a way that He speaks.
Amen.
But there are also other ways, like, for example, sometimes you'll get impressions, like I was talking about. Um, when I felt like I was supposed to move, it wasn't necessarily like I didn't hear an audible voice, but just I got this impression that something was going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, something like that. And it's just kind of learning to fine tune, like, when actually, when it's the Lord and when it's, like, your own thoughts, because sometimes the Lord sounds a lot like your own thoughts.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, He can speak to you through, basically He can speak to you through His word. Some people even get dreams from the Lord. and then also just like your own thoughts. And then there's also things like uh, that I'm learning now is he can actually speak to you like through your own like imagination, which he actually like he gave you an imagination and it's meant to like be used to like communicate with him and stuff, which is amazing. So anyway, yeah, those are some of the ways. It really is learning to fine tune like hearing the voice of God though. When I and it takes a lot of um like trial and error, it's like say you if you had an old fashioned radio and you have like the one with the dial where it's like you twist it and it changes to a different station. If you turn it a little bit too much to the right, you're going to get static. If you turn it too much to the left, you're going to get static. But it's learning to like fine tune like exactly where it's clear, and it does take time to like learn what that voice sounds like. But the more try and ask the Lord to hear from him, then the more he'll speak. So
Yeah, that's super good. Most people, as I went to Bible college and whatnot, and every time we talk about hearing the voice of God, everybody basically compares it to, like a practice. You just have to practice hearing God's voice. If you're not trying to, then you're never going to. I remember you and I and Tino, our buddy Tino, we went to an event, we went to a conference, and at this conference, it was called Power and Love. At this conference, you were basically equipped to go out into the streets, and we were in Portland. Go out into the streets to preach the gospel to people, hear from God about what He was saying about other people. And I remember I came home from that conference, and I was just so jacked. Like I was like, I'm gonna go to Walmart, and I'm just gonna tell everybody about Jesus. He's gonna speak to me, and I'm gonna give people words of knowledge, and I'm gonna tell people what's going on in their lives, and they're gonna be like, how did you know? And I'm gonna be like, because God told me. But anyway, I remember we were sitting at Taco Bell. I don't know if you were there, but I was there with a couple of friends. Maybe you were there, and I thought I was like getting a word of knowledge for this guy at the counter, and he ended up walking over to our table, and I was like, hey man, like I felt like maybe that he was like that his brother was having some sort of like medical issue or something like that. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, totally random question. Do you have a brother that is like, you know, does he have health issues? Is he like in the hospital right now or something? And this dude's like, no, I'm an only child. And I'm like, oh, never mind. And just like brush it off. But I mean, that's kind of the mindset that I feel like at least I had to take to really, fine tune, the voice of God, whether that be him speaking through me or him just speaking to me. I think it's just important that we learn how he speaks, and it's probably going to look different for everybody as well. So
mhm.
that's super, super encouraging.
Yeah.
Lastly, do you have one more thing to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and like, it's also like kind of like learning a language. So when you're learning a language, you can't be afraid to fail. Like you have to fail so that you can learn, what it sounds like. So in failure, there's actually like grace there, because um because then like, oh, okay, that wasn't the voice of God, so now I know to look for something else. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
that it's that learning. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually was having a conversation about I was having a conversation last night about this, that bank tellers, they don't necessarily study counterfeit bills, like counterfeit money or whatever, but they study what the real money feels like. They know exactly the signage of the real money, so much so that when they see a counterfeit, they know it's a counterfeit automatically because they know the real one. And the idea is that you'll never know. Basically, you know the truth so well that you don't have that you know immediately when you're hearing something wrong or hearing something that's not what the real truth is. And I think that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so last sort of question here. What is some advice, because I mean, even just listening to your story, we hear that there were some pretty uncertain times. You weren't really sure what was going to happen, but you knew God was going to provide for you. um, what's some advice you could give to people who are kind of feeling the same way, who are like, man, this is a tough situation, I don't know what's going to happen? How can they navigate that kind of feeling in their lives? What would you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, whether it's fear or like unbelief, like whatever you want to call it, because sometimes like fear and unbelief can be two different things. Sometimes you can believe that God won't do something, but not be afraid of the outcome. But sometimes you can be in a situation where you don't know how you're going to make it, and that's when you become fearful, all of that. So just wanted to differentiate the two. But I guess I would just say the like everybody, I feel like you kind of go through a process. And so I would just say don't try to shortcut the process of growing in your faith, I guess, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Had had I not gone through this, or had it taken a shorter amount of time um to find provision and be where I need to be, I probably wouldn't have learned my lesson, I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have learned that God will always provide, all of that. Even I'm just saying, there is there's power in the journey that it takes to get to where you are going.
Yeah.
And so even though it's never fun, it's never comfortable to be in a difficult situation, it's that learning to be full of faith. And you can even ask the Lord for faith. It's not like you have to conjure it up on your own. You can ask him, God, I'm feeling fearful right now, fill me with faith. And he will always answer. And even if there's still that fear thing inside of you, he'll prove to you over and over how much of a provider he is, how much he wants your dreams more than you want your dreams. He will always prove how much of a provider he is and how amazing he is, to the point where things that used to seem like a big deal just don't even matter anymore when it comes to the issues that you're facing. So
Yeah, that's really good. Going back to that first thing that you said, about how you wouldn't have really learned your lesson, or come out on the other side different. The Bible speaks to that. The Bible in the book of James actually says it a couple times. It says, "Count it all joy when you endure trials of many kinds." And then a couple verses later, it says, "Blessed is he who perseveres," because it's in the perseverance, it's in the trial that you really do come to know more about God, and come to know more about yourself ultimately. So yeah, man, thank you for sharing that. And I see your wife peeking out in the background there. So I have to ask this last question. What's number one on the Christmas wish list right now? Is it a PS5?
oh, your boy wants a PS5.
And while your wife's there, is a PS5 happening?
We'll see.
We'll
It's
see. That's an answer.
been harder to get my hands on than I imagined.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Not
you
in
know
my
what?
hands anymore.
Well, here's the good news is that we've been talking about God providing all day. So it's on the way, brother. We know that
Right.
for sure. Anyway, I think that's all we got for today, man. Let the people know, where can they follow you? I mean, I got all of probably like 20 or 30 weekly listeners, but let the people know where they can find you on Instagram, TikTok, whatever.
Yeah. So my TikTok is N4TE, short for Nate, or it's like a Nate, because the
Love
4
it.
looks like an A.
Yeah.
And then my Instagram is Nathan J Haight. So you can figure out my first name, and then JHAIGHT.
There it is. Perfect. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you saw at the beginning of the video, there was a pretty sick podcast intro, and that was filmed by Nathan. Filmed, edited, did it all. Yeah, it's super cool. So go check him out. Nathan, thanks for hopping on and dropping the wisdom, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you better believe it, my guy.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we will see you guys next time right back here.